I was sitting in the back of the classroom when it happened. One moment of courage that would change lives forever. She was only 8 years old, with pigtails and a bright yellow backpack that was too big for her tiny frame. But what she did next left an entire room of adults speechless. Nobody saw it coming, especially from the quietest girl in class. But that's the thing about courage. It doesn't always come from the people we expect. Sometimes it comes from the smallest voices, the ones we barely notice until they rise above everything else. And when they do, they change everything. I need to tell you this story because it shows us something we all need to be reminded of. That sometimes the smallest actions create the biggest ripples. That sometimes a child can teach us what it truly means to stand up for someone else. The moment lasted less than a minute. Just a few words spoken in defense of a boy who came to school wearing the same torn shoes for the 3rd year in a row. Words that caught the attention of one mother, but kind with influence, connections, and resources. Words that would transform not just one life, but an entire family. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. In a classroom where one little girl was about to show us all what real courage looks like. Have you ever witnessed something so pure, so genuine that it stays with you forever? I have, and I'm still haunted by it, in the best possible way. The kind of haunting that reminds you there's still good in this world when news headlines make you doubt it. The kind that makes you believe in the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Meadow Creek Elementary sits on the edge of town, where the suburbs give way to more rural properties. It's one of those schools where the economic divide is painfully obvious. Some kids arrive in luxury SUVs while others walk a mile from trailer parks hidden behind tree lines. The teachers try their best to create an equal environment inside those brick walls, but children notice everything. Lily Parker, 8 years old, was as average as they come. Brown hair, brown eyes, middle height, middle grade, the kind of child who blends into any crowd. Her father worked as an accountant. Her mother ran a small bakery downtown. They weren't wealthy, but Lily never worried about having what she needed. She had never experienced true want or struggle. Then there was Michael Dawson, same age as Lily, but that's where the similarities ended. Michael was tall for his age, painfully thin, with clothes that never quite fit right. His jeans always showed too much ankle. His shirts had permanent stains no amount of washing could remove. His shoes, those shoes were falling apart at the seams, held together with duct tape that he had colored black with marker in a heartbreaking attempt to make them look less broken. I was the teaching assistant in their 3rd grade classroom, quietly observing from the side as Miss Rodriguez taught math that Thursday morning. The classroom smelled of pencil shavings and the apple-scented hand sanitizer Miss Rodriguez kept on her desk. Outside, rain pattered against the windows, creating that cozy classroom feeling that makes learning feel more intimate. While most children were focused on their multiplication table, I noticed how Lily kept glancing over at Michael. He sat hunched in his chair, trying to make himself smaller, tucking those taped-up shoes under his desk where nobody could see them. But kids always notice these things. The incident happened during recess. Usually, the rain would have kept them inside, but it had cleared just enough for Ms. Rodriguez to allow them 15 minutes on the playground. The blacktop was still wet, puddles reflecting the cloudy sky like mirrors scattered across the ground. I stood by the door, watching the children play. Some jumped rope, others kicked a ball across the wet pavement. Michael sat alone on a bench, away from the others, reading a tattered library book. Lily was playing with her usual group of friends near the swing set. That's when Amber Wilson approached Michael. Amber was the unofficial queen of the 3rd grade, daughter of Patricia Wilson, who ran the most successful real estate agency in town and sat on half a dozen charity boards. Amber wore designer clothes even for elementary school and never let anyone forget it. I couldn't hear what she said to Michael at first, but I saw his face fall, his shoulders curl inward even more. Then her voice carried across the playground as she pointed to his shoes. Those aren't even real shoes anymore. My mom says people who don't take care of their things are lazy. Is your family lazy, Michael? Several children had stopped playing to watch. Some giggled nervously. Michael said nothing, his eyes fixed on his book, but I could see his hands trembling. I started moving toward them, But before I could intervene, something unexpected happened. Lily Parker broke away from her friends and walked directly to where Amber stood over Michael. "Stop it," she said, her voice clear and firm, not shouting but somehow cutting through all the playground noise. Amber turned, surprised. "What?" I said. "Stop it. You don't know anything about Michael or his family. Maybe his parents work harder than yours do." The playground fell silent. Even the children at the far end seemed to sense something important was happening. Amber's face flushed. "My mom says—" "I don't care what your mom says," Lily interrupted. "My dad says judging people by their stuff is shallow and wrong." Then she did something that made my heart swell. She sat down next to Michael on the bench. "I like your book. I read that one last month. The part with the dragon cave is the best part." Michael looked up, his eyes wide with surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. What none of us realized then was that Patricia Wilson had arrived early to pick up Amber for a dentist appointment. She stood at the edge of the playground, watching the entire exchange. I only noticed her when she approached Ms. Rodriguez, who had also come outside by then. The bell rang, signaling the end of recess. Children rushed back toward the building, the confrontation already forgotten by most. But as they filed past me, I saw Patricia Wilson speaking intently to Ms. Rodriguez, her eyes following Michael and Lily as they walked together toward the building. "Who is that boy?" I heard her ask, and the little girl who stood up for him. Little did I know that this simple question would set extraordinary events in motion. The next day continued normally. Michael wore the same taped shoes. Lily sat with her usual friends at lunch, though she smiled at Michael across the cafeteria. Nothing seemed different, except that Amber Wilson was unusually quiet. It was Monday when things began to change. Michael didn't come to school. Miss Rodriguez received a call that he was out sick. Tuesday, the same thing. By Wednesday, rumors were circulating among the children. Wild, imaginative theories about why Michael was absent. Maybe he moved away because he was embarrassed, one child suggested. "I heard his family is homeless now," another whispered. Lily looked worried each time Michael's name came up. I caught her staring at his empty desk several times. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the playground incident, everything changed. Ms. Rodriguez asked me to greet the children at the door while she prepared a special activity. I stood there watching them arrive one by one, hanging up coats still damp from the morning mist. Then I saw him, Michael Dawson, walking up the school path, but almost unrecognizable. His hair was neatly cut. He wore new jeans, a blue button-down shirt, and a gray jacket that fit him perfectly. On his feet were new sneakers, simple but clean and whole. Most striking was his posture. He walked taller, his eyes forward instead of fixed on the ground. Walking beside him was a woman I'd never seen before, presumably his mother. She was thin like Michael, with the same dark hair. She wore scrubs, like she might be a nurse or medical assistant. She looked tired, but there was something different about her too, a cautious pride in the way she walked her son to school. The transformation was so striking that several children stopped to stare. Michael noticed, and for a moment, the old discomfort flickered across his face. Then Lily came bounding up the sidewalk. "Michael, you're back!" she exclaimed, showing none of the hesitation the other children did. "I saved the science worksheet for you. We're doing a cool experiment with magnets today." His face broke into a smile, a real one that reached his eyes. "Thanks, Lily." As Michael's mother turned to leave, I noticed a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. Patricia Wilson stood beside it, talking with a man in a suit. When Michael's mother approached, Patricia embraced her, not the air kiss of acquaintances, but a genuine hug between people who had shared something meaningful. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew it was significant. The mystery deepened that afternoon when Miss Rodriguez called me over during art period. "Did you see Michael today?" she whispered, her eyes bright with emotion. I nodded. "The transformation is remarkable. Do you know what happened?" "Patricia Wilson happened," she said quietly. After she saw Lily stand up for Michael on the playground, she asked me about his family situation. I couldn't share much. Of course, confidentiality, but she did her own investigating. Ms. Rodriguez glanced around to make sure no children were listening. Michael's father left 2 years ago. His mother has been working 2 jobs, nursing assistant during the day and cleaning offices at night. They lost their apartment last year and have been living in a single room at his grandmother's house. I looked over at Michael, carefully coloring within the lines, his new clothes still stiff with department store crease. Patricia hired Michael's mother full-time at her real estate agency, handling the office administration, better pay, regular hours, benefits, and she found them an affordable apartment in one of her properties. I was stunned. Patricia Wilson had a reputation for being ruthless in business and raising a somewhat entitled daughter. This didn't fit the image I had of her. Why would she do all that? I asked. Ms. Rodriguez smiled. Apparently, her own mother was a single parent who struggled. She said when she saw Lily stand up for Michael, it reminded her of how a teacher once stood up for her in school. She'd forgotten what that felt like, to have someone defend you when you're at your most vulnerable. The story might have ended there, a wealthy woman helping a struggling family, inspired by a child's moment of kindness. It would have been enough. But what happened over the next few months showed how a single act of courage can create ripples that keep expanding outward. Michael began to thrive. With stable housing and his mother working just 1 job with regular hours, he started getting enough sleep and regular meals. His grades improved dramatically. He slowly came out of his shell, revealing a sharp wit and natural leadership abilities no one had seen before. Lily and Michael became inseparable friends. She introduced him to her circle, and soon he was a regular at birthday parties and playground games. The other children, following Lily's lead, accepted him completely, the memory of his old shoes fading with each passing week. But the most remarkable change was in Patricia Wilson. Through Michael's mother, she learned more about the struggles of working parents in our community. She discovered how many families were one emergency away from homelessness, how many children came to school hungry or exhausted because their parents worked multiple jobs. One Monday in late spring, Ms. Rodriguez shared a surprising announcement with our class. "I have exciting news," she told the children. "Mrs. Wilson is starting a special program for our school called Community Bridges. They'll be providing after-school care with homework help, a weekend food backpack program, and a clothes closet where families can get nice clothes for free." The children seemed more interested in the prospect of extra playground time after school than in the social significance, but I understood the magnitude of what was happening. Later that week, I was helping set up for the program's launch event in the gymnasium when I overheard Patricia speaking with the principal. "It was really Lily Parker who inspired all this," she was saying. "Watching her stand up for Michael that day, it changed something in me. I realized I'd been teaching Amber all the wrong lessons." She looked across the gym where Amber and Lily were hanging colorful signs together, giggling over some private joke. Nearby, Michael was carefully arranging chairs, taking his role as helper very seriously. "Children see things so clearly sometimes," Patricia continued. "They haven't learned to look away from need or justify an action." Lily saw someone being hurt, and she simply stood up, regardless of social cost. I'd forgotten how to do that. The Community Bridges program launched with tremendous success. Within months, it expanded to 3 other schools in the district. Patricia used her considerable social influence to bring other wealthy families on board, creating a sustainable funding model. Michael's mother, Janet, became the program coordinator, leveraging her experience as both a health worker and someone who had experienced hardship firsthand. The position came with a salary that finally allowed her family stability. As for Lily, she remained remarkably unchanged by the impact of her actions. When a local newspaper wanted to do a story about how her courage had sparked the program, she seemed genuinely confused. "I didn't do anything special," she told me when I mentioned the reporter's interest. "Michael is my friend. You're supposed to stick up for your friends." By the end of the school year, the ripple effects had grown even larger. Patricia Wilson announced a scholarship fund for children from single-parent households, named in honor of her own mother. The first recipient would be eligible in 10 years, just when Michael and Lily's class would be graduating high school. At the final assembly of the year, I watched as Michael received an award for Most Improved Student. His mother sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face. Beside her was Patricia, clapping as enthusiastically as if it were her own child on stage. Afterward, in the hallway crowded with proud parents and relieved children ready for summer, I spotted Lily and Michael sitting on a bench, sharing a cupcake from the celebration. Patricia and Janet stood nearby, deep in conversation, occasionally glancing at their children with identical expressions of pride. Ms. Rodriguez joined me in watching them. "It's remarkable, isn't it?" she said softly. "How the actions of one small person can change so many lives." "I was just thinking the same thing," I replied, "though I'm not sure Lily even realizes what she set in motion. That's what makes it even more beautiful." Ms. Rodriguez said, "She didn't do it to be recognized or praised. She did it because it was right." We continue to observe the unlikely friendship between these two families. One that had begun with a child's simple act of standing up against injustice. As the years passed, the changes only deepened and expanded. The Community Bridges program eventually served every school in the district, providing support to hundreds of families. Michael's mother completed a degree in social work, funded in part by a scholarship Patricia helped establish. Amber Wilson, influenced by Lily's example and her mother's transformation, became known for her own kindness toward others, the entitled attitude of her early years replaced by genuine compassion. Michael and Lily remained friends throughout middle school and into high school. They were different in many ways. He excelled in science and mathematics, while she discovered a passion for writing and art, but the bond formed in third grade proved remarkably resilient. I left my position at Meadow Creek after that year to pursue a teaching degree of my own, but I kept in touch with Ms. Rodriguez and followed the progress of the program through local news. 10 years after that rainy day on the playground, I returned to town for a special ceremony. The first Wilson Family Scholarship was being awarded, and Miss Rodriguez had invited me to attend. The ceremony was held in the high school auditorium. I slipped into a seat in the back, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. They were easy to spot. Patricia Wilson, still elegant and commanding, but with a warmth that had been absent a decade earlier. Janet Dawson, now Director of Family Services for the Community Bridges Foundation, looking confident and professional. And there, sitting together near the front, were Michael and Lily, now teenagers on the cusp of adulthood. Michael had grown tall and confident, a far cry from the hunched boy with taped shoes. Lily remained unremarkable in appearance. Average height, average looks, but there was a quiet confidence in her posture that drew the eye. When they announced the scholarship recipient, it came as no surprise to anyone in the know. A girl from a single-parent household who had overcome significant obstacles to excel academically while caring for younger siblings. As she accepted the award, she thanked the foundation, her teachers, and her mother. Then she said something that brought tears to my eyes. "And I want to thank Michael Dawson and Lily Parker. You don't know me, but your story has been an inspiration to everyone at my school. 10 years ago, you showed that kindness matters, that standing up for someone can change lives. Today, I promise to continue that legacy." I watched Michael and Lily exchange surprised glances. Patricia had never told them the scholarship was connected to their story. It was clear from their expressions that they had no idea the impact they'd had, how their small moment on a rainy playground had grown into something that would continue changing lives for years to come. After the ceremony, I approached them. Lily recognized me immediately. "Miss Harper, I can't believe you're here," she exclaimed, giving me a hug. "Are you still teaching?" "I am," I told her. "Thanks in part to watching you that day on the playground. You inspired me to get my teaching credential." Michael looked puzzled. "What day on the playground?" I was surprised. "The day you were being bullied about your shoes, and Lily stood up for you. The day that eventually led to all this." I gestured around us, at the banner for the Community Bridges Foundation that hung on the wall. They exchanged another glance, and then Michael laughed. "That's what started all this." "I barely remember it. It was so long ago." "I remember," Lily said softly, "but I never connected it to Mrs. Wilson helping your family. I thought that was just a coincidence." Patricia joined us then, elegant in a blue dress. "Not a coincidence," she said, having overheard. That moment changed everything. It made me reevaluate what I was teaching Amber about worth and value. It reminded me of my own childhood and the teacher who once showed me kindness when others didn't. She looked at Lily with genuine admiration. You were 8 years old, and you taught me more in 30 seconds than I'd learned in 40 years. Lily blushed, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what anyone would do. But that's just it, I said. Not anyone would do it. Most people, most adults would have walked past. We convince ourselves it's not our problem, or someone else will help, or maybe the person deserves their struggles somehow. Michael nodded thoughtfully. I think I would have kept my head down if I saw someone else being bullied back then. I was too afraid of becoming the target myself. Exactly, Patricia said. Fear keeps us silent. Convenience keeps us uninvolved. But you, she looked at Lily, you showed courage when it would have been easier not to. And that one moment created all of this. She gestured to the crowded room, where families were celebrating the 10 scholarship recipients of the Foundation's anniversary year. As we spoke, Amber Wilson approached, now a poised young woman so different from the bratty child she'd once been. Mum, the reporter from the Tribune wants a quote about the expansion to Carter County Schools. Patricia excused herself, and Amber stayed behind. There was an awkward moment as she faced Michael and Lily. I was pretty awful back then, wasn't I? She said suddenly. We were 8, Lily said with a shrug. Everyone does dumb things when they're 8. Not you, Amber replied with a small smile. You did something brave. I watched the 3 of them, Michael, Lily, and Amber, standing together, connected by a moment most of them barely remembered. 3 lives transformed because one little girl refused to remain silent in the face of cruelty. Later, as people were leaving, I found myself standing next to Janet Dawson. We had never formally met during my time at the school. You were there that day, weren't you? She asked. On the playground? I nodded. I was heading over to intervene, but Lily got there first. Janet looked across the room at her son, now talking animatedly with a group of friends. I've tried to explain to Michael how close we were to homelessness back then. He doesn't really understand. He remembers things were hard, but not how hard. She turned to me, her eyes bright with emotion. I was working 80 hours a week and still falling behind. The night before that day on the playground, I'd been sitting at our table, trying to figure out which bills I could skip that month. I decided it would have to be the phone. I remember thinking I should just give up, maybe see if my parents would take Michael while I got back on my feet. I listened, stunned by how close this family had come to being torn apart. Then Patricia called the school, got my contact information. She said she needed office help, heard I had medical background. I thought it was too good to be true. Janet shook her head in wonder. 10 years later, I have a degree, a career I love, and my son is going to college next year. All because a little girl stood up to a bully. As people continued to file out of the auditorium, I noticed Lily standing alone, reading the plaque that listed all the scholarship recipients through the years. I joined her. It's quite a legacy, I said. She turned to me, her expression thoughtful. Ms. Harper, do you think things would have turned out differently if I hadn't said anything that day? I considered her question carefully. I believe they would have. I was coming to intervene, but I might have simply separated everyone, given a lecture about kindness. I doubt it would have made the impression on Patricia that your words did. But why? What was so special about what I did? I just told Amber to stop being mean. I thought about how to explain the significance of that moment to someone who had, being too young to fully understand it. Lily, there's a phenomenon called the bystander effect. When something wrong is happening, most people look around to see how others are reacting. If no one else is intervening, they assume it must not be that serious, or not their responsibility to help. That day, 23 children, and at least 2 adults saw what was happening to Michael. Only one person acted. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Your courage gave Patricia permission to remember her own childhood, to reconnect with the empathy she'd buried beneath years of privilege and social climbing. You reminded her of who she wanted to be. Lily looked back at the plaque, at the names of students who would get a college education because of a chain of events she'd started. I guess small things can make a big difference. The smallest actions often do, I agreed. A word of kindness, a moment of courage. They can alter the course of many lives. As we left the auditorium together, Lily suddenly laughed. You know what's funny? I remember being scared when I spoke up. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I wasn't trying to be brave at all. That's exactly what courage is, I told her. Being afraid but acting anyway, because something matters more than your fear. The evening ended with a reception in the school library. I watched as Michael and Lily moved among the guests, still connected by an invisible thread woven that rainy day years ago. They had no idea that they would be leaving this town soon, Michael to study engineering, Lily to pursue journalism, but that the foundation started in their name would continue growing, supporting children they would never meet. Patricia Wilson found me as I was preparing to leave. "I've been wanting to thank you for years," she said. "Me? Why?" "You were there that day. You saw what happened, and you told Rodriguez, who told me." I shook my head. "I was just a witness. It was Lily who acted." Patricia smiled. "Yes, but you remembered. You saw the significance when others might have forgotten, and you helped me understand what I'd witnessed. A moment of pure moral courage from an unexpected source." She glanced over at where Amber was helping younger scholarship recipients with their photos. My daughter was becoming exactly the kind of person I taught her to be. Entitled, judgmental, measuring others by what they owned rather than who they were. Seeing Lily that day was like looking in a mirror and not liking what I saw. I understood then that the transformation hadn't just affected Michael's family or created a foundation. It had changed Patricia herself, healing something broken from her own childhood. "We all need mirrors sometimes," I said. As I drove home that night, I thought about how that one moment on the playground had expanded outward like ripples in a pond, touching hundreds of lives, creating opportunities and second chances for families throughout the community. All because one little girl spoke up when it would have been easier to remain silent. I've been a teacher now for many years. I've seen children be cruel and kind, courageous and cowardly. But I always tell my students the story of Lily Parker, though I change the names to protect privacy. I tell them how she defended a boy with taped shoes, and how that simple act transformed not just his life, but an entire community. I tell them that courage isn't about grand gestures or enormous sacrifice. Sometimes it's just speaking up when everyone else is silent. Sometimes it's sitting next to someone who's alone. The Scholarship Foundation eventually expanded statewide. Michael Dawson became an engineer, developing affordable housing solutions for low-income communities. Lily Parker became a journalist focused on social justice issues. Amber Wilson took over her mother's real estate business, but ran it with a strong ethical commitment, providing affordable housing options and continuing to fund the foundation her mother had started. And it all began with a little girl who couldn't walk past suffering without trying to help. I often think about that day when I'm faced with a difficult choice, when speaking up would be uncomfortable or inconvenient. I ask myself, what would Lily do? The 8-year-old girl with the moral clarity to see what was right, and the courage to act on it, despite her fear. Sometimes the smallest voices create the loudest echoes. Sometimes the briefest moments create the longest legacies. And sometimes the greatest courage comes from the most unexpected places, like a little girl on a rainy playground, defending a classmate's dignity when no one else would. If this story touched you, take a deep breath and think about the Michael in your life, the person who might need someone to stand up for them when no one else will. Be that person's Lily. A single moment of courage might create ripples you'll never fully see, but that doesn't make them any less real or powerful. Remember that change doesn't always require grand gestures or tremendous resources. Sometimes it starts with just a few words, spoken with conviction when it would be easier to remain silent. You might be wondering if this story is real. I can tell you that while I've changed names and some specific details to protect privacy, the essence of it is absolutely true. Not just once, but many times over in schools and playgrounds and workplaces across the country. Every day. Ordinary people, often children, show extraordinary courage in small moments that change the trajectory of lives. I think about all the Michaels in our world today. The kids who try to hide their circumstances, who color in the duct tape on their shoes with markers, who hunch their shoulders and try to become invisible. I think about all the Lilies who might stand up for them or remain silent. And I think about all the Patricias who might witness such moments and be transformed by them, or walk away unchanged. Each interaction holds such potential, Each moment offers us a choice. Each of us has the power to start ripples of change, whether we recognize that power or not. What strikes me most about Lily's story is how she never saw her actions as heroic. To her, it was simple. Someone was being treated unfairly, so she spoke up. The moral calculation took seconds. There was no weighing of consequences, no careful political calculus, no concern for how it might affect her social standing. She simply saw wrong and tried to make it right. Children have that clarity sometimes, a moral compass uncluttered by the complications we adults add to our decision-making. We talk ourselves out of action. We rationalize inaction. We convince ourselves that problems are too complex, too entrenched to be solved by ordinary people like us. But what if we're wrong about that? What if, like Lily, we trusted our instincts when they tell us something isn't right? What if we spoke up, even when our voices might shake? What if we sat down beside someone who was alone, even when it might cost us socially? I believe our world would look very different. I see it in my classroom every year. The small kindnesses that transform a child's day. The tiny acts of inclusion that help a lonely student find belonging. The brave defenses that stop bullying in its tracks. These moments rarely make headlines. They don't become viral videos or trending hashtags, but they change lives nonetheless. One student shares lunch with a classmate who has none. Another invites the new kid to join a game at recess. A third corrects a friend who makes a hurtful comment about someone's appearance. Small acts, tiny ripples, but together, they create the culture of a classroom, a school, a community. I sometimes ask my students to imagine what would happen if everyone performed one deliberate act of courage or kindness each day. Not grand gestures requiring wealth or influence, but the small, accessible acts available to all of us. Speaking up when someone is mistreated, including those who are excluded, sharing what we have with those who have less, acknowledging the humanity of people others ignore. The math is simple but staggering. One person performing one small act each day for a year creates 365 ripples. A classroom of 20 students creates 7,300. A school of 500 creates 182,500. A small town creates millions. And each ripple has the potential to inspire others, to change systems, to transform lives in ways we might never witness or fully understand. Just like Lily never fully understood how her moment on the playground transformed not just Michael's life, but an entire community through Patricia Wilson's awakening. I know what some of you might be thinking. Not all acts of courage have happy endings. Not all standing up leads to positive change. Sometimes it just leads to rejection, ridicule, or worse. And you're right. There's no guarantee that your courage will be rewarded or even acknowledged. Lily could have been ostracized by her peers for standing up to the popular girl. Patricia Wilson could have remained unmoved by what she witnessed, or even been offended by the challenge to her daughter's behavior. Courage always involves risk. Always. That's what makes it courage rather than something easier. But consider the alternative. The certainty of allowing injustice to continue unchallenged. The guarantee that nothing will change if no one acts to change it. The assurance that the Michaels of this world will continue to suffer alone if no Lilies ever stand beside them. When we weigh the certainty of continued injustice against the possibility of positive change, the moral choice becomes clearer. Let me tell you one last detail about Lily and Michael's story. About 3 years after the scholarship ceremony, when they were both in college, I received an email from Lily. She'd been thinking about our conversation at the ceremony, about the significance of that playground moment. I still don't think I did anything special, she wrote. But I've been wondering about something. What if you had reached Michael and Amber before I did that day? Would everything still have happened the same way? I thought carefully before responding. Probably not, I wrote back. I would have handled it like most adults do. Separated the children. Maybe had a private talk with Amber about kindness. Perhaps checked in with Michael later. But I wouldn't have sat down beside him. I wouldn't have talked about his book. And Patricia Wilson wouldn't have seen what she saw. A child modeling the moral courage she herself had forgotten. So it does matter who acts, not just that someone acts, Lily replied. Yes, I told her. It matters tremendously. Your action carried a power that mine wouldn't have, precisely because you were a peer with nothing to gain. That's what touched Patricia so deeply, seeing her own daughter challenged not by authority, but by moral clarity from another child. The most powerful voices are sometimes those with the least official power. The child who stands up to the bully, the junior employee who questions unethical practices, the ordinary citizen who challenges injustice. They speak not from authority, but from moral conviction, and that carries a unique power to pierce defenses and touch hearts. You may not have wealth, or influence, or position. You may think your voice doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. You may believe that the problems you see are too big, too complex for someone like you to impact. But Lily's story suggests otherwise. It suggests that ordinary people, even children, hold extraordinary power to create change through small acts of courage and kindness. It suggests that systems and cycles can be broken when someone refuses to follow the expected script. It suggests that we all have more power than we realize to start ripples that might become waves. Today, as you go about your life, look for the Michaels in your world, the people who might need someone to stand beside them when no one else will. Look for the moments where a small action on your part might create ripples of change. Look for the opportunities to be someone's Lily, because change doesn't require special qualifications or resources. It doesn't demand grand gestures or extraordinary sacrifice. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, "Stop it," when you witness cruelty. Sometimes it's as easy as sitting beside someone who stands alone. And those small actions, multiplied across thousands of ordinary people making similar choices each day, have the power to transform our community, one ripple at a time. I still visit Meadow Creek Elementary sometimes. The Community Bridges program has its own wing now, serving hundreds of families throughout the district. There's a plaque in the main hallway commemorating its founding, with Patricia Wilson's name prominently displayed as the founder. Only a handful of people know the full story, that it really began with an 8-year-old girl who couldn't bear to watch a classmate being humiliated over taped-up shoes. That the real founder of Community Bridges was Lily Parker, who never sought recognition or praise, who simply did what she knew was right in a moment when it mattered. But perhaps that's how most meaningful change happens in our world. Not through the grand, documented gestures of the powerful, but through the small, unrecorded acts of ordinary people whose names don't appear on plaques, but whose courage changes lives nonetheless. People like you. People who might, after hearing this story, look at their own sphere of influence differently. Who might recognize the power they hold to start ripples. Who might choose courage over silence the next time they witness injustice. Who might remember Lily and Michael and Patricia, and how a single moment on a rainy playground transformed countless lives. Your moment might be waiting for you today. A chance to stand up, speak out, sit beside someone who stands alone. A chance to be someone's Lily. A chance to start ripples that might become waves. Will you recognize it when it comes? Will you have the courage to act? I believe you will. Because if an 8-year-old girl with pigtails and a bright yellow backpack could find that courage within herself, surely we can find it within ourselves too. The moment might seem small, insignificant even. The words might be simple. Stop it. The action might be minimal, sitting on a bench beside someone who's alone. But the impact might echo through lives and years in ways you'll never fully see. That's the power each of us hold. The power to create ripples that might change everything, just like Lily's did. If this story touched you, take a deep breath and think about the Michael in your life, the person who might need someone to stand up for them when no one else will. Be that person's Lily. A single moment of courage might create ripples you'll never fully see, but that doesn't make them any less real or powerful. Remember that change doesn't always require grand gestures or tremendous resources. Sometimes it starts with just a few words, spoken with conviction when it would be easier to remain silent. Leave a like if this story moved you. Subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes whose small actions created extraordinary change. And share this with someone who might need to be reminded that they have the power to make a difference. One small act of courage at a time. Because in the end, it's not the grand speeches or public donations that change the world most profoundly. It's the quiet moments of kindness and courage that often go unnoticed but create ripples that continue long after the moment has passed, just like Lily's did. I've thought about this story many times over the years. I've watched how a single act of childhood bravery sparked a chain reaction that nobody could have predicted. I've wondered how many other potential moments like this pass us by every day. Opportunities to stand up, speak out, make a difference, that we let slip away because we're too busy, too afraid, or too convinced that our voice won't matter. But Lily's voice mattered. It echoed through years and lives, creating changes that statistics can't fully capture, in confidence restored, in dignity preserved, in hope rekindled. One child standing up for another changed the trajectory of dozens, then hundreds of lives. I sometimes imagine an alternate timeline where Lily stayed silent that day, where Michael continued to be bullied, his mother continued to struggle alone, and Patricia Wilson remained disconnected from her own past and the struggles of others in her community. A world where community bridges never existed, where those scholarships were never funded, where those families never found stability. All of that potential good, erased by a single moment of silence that seemed easier, safer, more convenient in the moment. It makes me wonder how many alternate futures we erase every day when we choose silence over speaking up, when we walk past suffering because addressing it would be uncomfortable or inconvenient, when we tell ourselves that one person can't really make a difference anyway, but one person can. Lily proved that. An 8-year-old girl with no power, no wealth, no special training or skills, just a clear sense of right and wrong and the courage to act on it. If she could do it, what's our excuse? I keep a small photo on my desk now, not of Lily or Michael specifically, but of a playground similar to the one where it all happened. It reminds me to be brave in small ways every day, to speak up when it would be easier not to stand beside those who stand alone. Because you never know which small act of courage might create ripples that change lives for generations to come. That's the power each of us holds. The power to start ripples that might become waves. Sometimes I think about all the unsung heroes like Lily, whose names we'll never know. The ones who step up in ordinary moments and change the course of lives without fanfare or recognition. They're all around us, holding doors, offering seats, defending strangers, speaking uncomfortable truths, extending hands to those who've fallen. Their actions rarely make headlines, but they make our world more humane, more just, more kind. They remind us that heroism isn't reserved for special people in extraordinary circumstances. It's available to all of us, in the small choices we make each day. The choice to see suffering rather than look away. The choice to act rather than remain passive. The choice to stand with rather than stand apart. In a world that often feels divided and harsh, these small heroes offer hope. They show us that human goodness persists, that courage appears in unexpected places, that change begins with individual choices multiplied across countless lives.